Have you ever walked into a room full of people and felt completely alone? Not because no one was there, but because no one could truly see you? And then, just once, maybe twice in a lifetime, you meet someone and everything shifts. The air changes, time slows. You don't just meet their eyes, you meet their soul. And in that moment you realize, this person knows. They've walked the path you've walked. They've seen what you've seen. They've awakened to the same truth that changed everything for you. The ancient Taoists had a name for this experience. They called it recognizing the original face. When two beings who have touched the Tao meet in this world of 10,000 things. It's not romance, though it can feel like falling. It's not friendship, though it may become that. It's recognition, soul recognition. And what happens next will either terrify you or set you free. Let me tell you what the sages never wrote in the texts, what can only be understood through lived experience. When two awakened souls meet, the world as you know it begins to dissolve. I learned this the hard way. 3 years ago, I was sitting in a small tea house in the mountains, the kind of place where silence is respected more than conversation. I had spent 2 years in solitude after what I can only describe as my own shattering, a complete dismantling of who I thought I was. The Taoists call this the great death before physical death. Everything I had built my identity on, my career, my relationships, my carefully crafted image, had collapsed. And in that collapse, I found something. Or rather, something found me. A stillness. A presence. The Tao, though I hesitate to name it, because as Zhuangzi wrote in the Dao De Jing, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. I had learned to be alone without being lonely. I had learned to sit with the void and find it full. I thought I had completed my journey. I was wrong. She walked in on a Tuesday afternoon, ordered jasmine tea, and sat 3 tables away. I noticed her the way you notice a shift in temperature, not with thought, but with the body. There was a quality to her presence, a groundedness, a lack of performance. Most people walk into rooms apologizing for existing or demanding to be seen. She did neither. She simply was. We didn't speak that first day, or the second. But on the third day, when our eyes met, something passed between us that I can only describe as mutual recognition. It wasn't attraction, though there was that too. It was deeper. It was the recognition of one who has walked through fire, seeing another who carries the same ash. When we finally spoke, there was no small talk. She didn't ask what I did for a living or where I was from. She asked, "What broke you open?" And I knew exactly what she meant, because awakening isn't a gentle process. It's a shattering. And those who have been shattered can always recognize the repair work in another. Here's what the ancient Taoist texts tell us about this moment, though they speak in metaphor and poetry. In the Zhuangzi, there's a story of 2 fish who have been separated from the river. They blow bubbles of moisture to keep each other alive, but the text says, it is better for them to forget each other in the rivers and lakes. This sounds like a teaching about non-attachment, and it is, but it's also about recognition. Those 2 fish know each other because they share the same crisis, the same awakening to their true nature. When 2 awakened souls meet, they are like those fish. They recognize the shared journey from forgetfulness to remembering. Let me be clear about what I mean by awakened souls. I'm not talking about perfect people. I'm not talking about gurus or masters who have transcended all human emotion. That's a fantasy, and a harmful one. The Taoists understood that awakening doesn't mean leaving humanity behind. It means fully inhabiting it. An awakened soul is simply someone who has stopped running from their own depths. Someone who has faced their shadows and found that the darkness was not their enemy. Someone who has died to their false self and discovered that what remains is both smaller and infinitely larger than they imagined. These are the people who have stopped performing. They've stopped trying to be spiritual or enlightened or good. They've dropped the exhausting work of maintaining an image. And in that dropping, they've found something real. The Tao Te Ching says, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." Awakened souls have stopped trying to convince anyone of their awakening. They simply live from it. So what happens when 2 such people meet? First, there is the shock of being truly seen. Most of us spend our entire lives hiding. We hide our wounds, our shame, our deepest fears. We present carefully curated versions of ourselves, hoping they'll be enough to earn love, acceptance, belonging. But awakened souls have already done the work of seeing themselves fully. They've sat with their own darkness. They've forgiven their own humanity. They've stopped hiding from themselves. So when they meet another who has done the same, hiding becomes impossible. This is terrifying. Even for someone who has done deep inner work, being truly seen is one of the most vulnerable experiences possible, because now you're not just seen by yourself or by the Tao, or by whatever you call the infinite. You're seen by another human being, and they see not just your light, but your shadow, not just your wisdom, but your wounds, not just who you've become, but who you used to be. But here's the gift. They don't turn away, because they've met those same places in themselves. Your anxiety doesn't scare them because they've sat with their own. Your grief doesn't overwhelm them because they've wept their own tears. Your rage doesn't threaten them because they've befriended their own fire. In the presence of another awakened soul, you finally understand what unconditional presence feels like. Not unconditional love, which is often just another spiritual concept we haven't earned, but unconditional presence. The ability to be with what is without trying to fix it, change it, or run from it. The Taoists call this Wu Wei, effortless action, or more accurately, non-forcing. When two awakened souls meet, there is a quality of Wu Wei in their interaction. Nothing is forced, nothing is performed. There's no agenda, no manipulation, no trying to get something from the other person. There's just presence meeting presence, depth meeting depth, truth meeting truth. Let me give you a concrete example from my own experience. In my previous relationships, before my awakening, I had always presented myself in specific ways depending on who I was with. With some people, I was the strong one, the one who had it all together. With others, I was the vulnerable one, the one who needed support. These were not conscious lies, but they were masks, partial truths presented as the whole truth. When I met this woman in the tea house, I tried to do the same thing. Old habits die hard. In our first real conversation, I started to tell her about my spiritual journey in a way that made me sound more evolved than I was. I talked about my meditation practice, my insights, my transformation. I was performing spirituality, which is perhaps the most subtle and dangerous form of ego. She let me talk for about 5 minutes. Then she said something that stopped me cold. She said, "You're doing it again, aren't you? Trying to be someone. You can stop. I'm not interested in your highlight reel. Tell me about last Tuesday, when you woke up at 3 in the morning in a panic and doubted everything you think you know." I stared at her. "How did you—" "Because I woke up at 3:15 on Thursday with the same panic. This is the thing they don't tell you about awakening. It doesn't make the panic go away. It just changes your relationship to it. So tell me the truth. Not the spiritual truth, the human truth." And in that moment, something in me cracked open, because she was right. I had been performing, and she had seen through it not with judgment, but with recognition. She knew because she'd done the same thing. We all do. Even after awakening, the ego doesn't disappear. It just becomes more transparent to us. We see it doing its thing, trying to protect us, trying to make us special, trying to keep us safe. And in seeing it, we develop compassion for it, for ourselves. This is the second thing that happens when awakened souls meet. There is a deepening of self-compassion. Because when you meet someone else who struggles with the same things you do, who faces the same doubts, the same fears, the same moments of forgetting and remembering, you realize something profound. You realize that your struggles are not evidence of failure. They're evidence of being human. And being human is not a problem to solve. It's the whole point. The Tao Te Ching teaches, the soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. For years, I misunderstood this teaching. I thought it meant I should be soft, gentle, never angry, never assertive. But that's not what it means at all. It means that when we stop trying to force life into the shapes we think it should take, when we stop rigidly clinging to our ideas of how things should be, we become responsive rather than reactive. We become like water, which flows around obstacles rather than trying to smash through them. When two awakened souls meet, they practice this teaching together. They don't try to force the relationship into any particular shape. They don't ask, "What is this? Where is this going? What does this mean?" They simply allow it to be what it is. This drives the ego crazy, because the ego wants definition, wants security, wants to know. But the Tao operates in mystery, in unknowing, in the space between definitions. Here's what I learned in those months of knowing her. Awakened souls don't complete each other. This is not a romantic fairy tale. They mirror each other. And mirrors show us everything, the beautiful and the uncomfortable. She reflected back to me the places where I was still clinging, still trying to control, still playing small. And I did the same for her. This wasn't always pleasant. In fact, there were times when being around her was deeply uncomfortable, because she wouldn't let me hide in my familiar patterns. There was one evening when I was telling her about a conflict I was having with a family member. I was telling it in a way that made me the victim, the enlightened one dealing with unconscious people. She listened quietly, and then she said, "Tell me the story again, but this time, tell me what you're not saying. Tell me the part where you're contributing to this pattern." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to explain why I was right and they were wrong, but I couldn't, because she was right. I was leaving out the part where I was being self-righteous, where I was using my spiritual awareness as a weapon, where I was refusing to meet my family member where they were because I was too busy being evolved. This is the gift of awakened mirrors. They don't let you spiritually bypass. They don't let you use awakening as an excuse to avoid your humanity. They call you back to the truth again and again, with love and with relentless honesty. The ancient Taoists understood this. They knew that the path of awakening is not linear. It's not a ladder you climb where each step takes you higher and higher until you're finally enlightened and never have to deal with human stuff again. No, the path is a spiral. You return to the same lessons, the same patterns, the same wounds, but each time you return, you see them from a slightly different angle. You have more compassion, more spaciousness, more capacity to be with what is. When two awakened souls meet, they walk this spiral together. Not hand in hand like romantic partners, necessarily, though they might, but as companions who have agreed to tell each other the truth, to not let each other hide, to celebrate the breakthroughs and sit with the breakdowns, to remember together that this path is not about perfection, it's about presence. Now here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that no one talks about, the part that you only understand through direct experience. When two awakened souls meet, they don't just affect each other, they affect everyone around them. There's a principle in Taoist philosophy called Ti, often translated as virtue, but more accurately understood as the power or energy that flows through someone who is aligned with the Tao. When you cultivate your connection to the Tao, you naturally begin to emanate a quality that affects others, not through words or teaching, but through presence. Now imagine two people who have cultivated this quality. When they come together, something happens in the field around them. It's subtle, but people notice. They feel it. Conversations deepen. Strangers open up. The atmosphere in a room changes. This isn't magic. It's not supernatural. It's simply what happens when two people who have done their inner work create space together. That space becomes an invitation for others to drop their masks too. I noticed this when we would sit in that tea house together. Other customers would come in, and inevitably, someone would strike up a conversation with us. And within minutes, they would be talking about things they don't normally talk about with strangers. Their fears, their dreams, their losses. It was as if our presence together gave them permission to be real. This is the third thing that happens when awakened souls meet. They create sacred space, not intentionally, not by trying, but simply by being what they are. The Tao Te Ching says, "The Tao does nothing, yet nothing is left undone." This is what it means. When you stop trying to be spiritual, you become an invitation for others to discover their own spirituality. When you stop trying to help people, you become genuinely helpful. When you stop performing awakening, you become truly awake. Let me share with you what I learned about the stages of this kind of meeting, because it's not all bliss and recognition. There are distinct phases, and they mirror the stages of alchemical transformation that the Taoists mapped out thousands of years ago. The first stage is what they called gathering the medicine. This is the initial recognition, the meeting, the moment when you realize, this person sees me. This stage is intoxicating. It feels like coming home. It feels like every conversation is essential, like every silence is full of meaning. You want to spend all your time together because being around them makes you feel more alive, more real, more yourself than you felt in years. This stage can last days, weeks, sometimes months. But then comes the second stage, the firing process. This is when things get uncomfortable. This is when the mirror starts showing you things you don't want to see. This is when their presence starts triggering your old patterns, your defenses, your wounds. You might find yourself getting irritated by things that didn't bother you before. You might start noticing their flaws, their limitations, their humanity. The pedestal you unconsciously put them on starts to crack. This is the most crucial stage, and it's where most connections between awakened souls fall apart. Because this stage requires something that even awakened people struggle with: the willingness to stay when it gets uncomfortable. The willingness to not run, not spiritually bypass, not pretend everything is fine when it's not. The willingness to say, I'm triggered right now, and I know it's my work to do, but I need you to know that this is hard. I almost lost her in this stage. There was a period of about 3 weeks when I pulled away. I stopped going to the tea house. I stopped answering her messages. I told myself I needed space, but really, I was scared. Scared of being seen too deeply, scared of the ways she challenged me, scared that I wasn't as awakened as I thought I was. The ego will do anything to protect itself, even from love, even from truth. She let me have that space. She didn't chase me or try to fix it or demand an explanation. She simply held space. And after 3 weeks of sitting with my resistance, I realized something. I realized that running from her was really running from myself. She wasn't the problem. She was the mirror, and I didn't like what I was seeing. So I went back to the tea house. She was there, at her usual table. I sat down across from her and said, "I've been running." She nodded. "I know." I said, "I think I need to run sometimes." She smiled. "I know that too. The question is, will you come back?" And I understood then what she was really asking. She was asking if I was willing to stay in the fire of transformation, if I was willing to let this connection forge me into something more true. The third stage is what the Taoists called circulation of the light. This is when the relationship finds its rhythm. You've been through the fire. You've seen each other's shadows. You've triggered each other and worked through it. And now there's a quality of ease, not because everything is perfect, but because you've learned to navigate the imperfect together. You've learned each other's patterns. You know when to push and when to give space. You know when to speak and when to be silent. In this stage, the connection becomes genuinely nourishing. You're no longer trying to get something from each other. You're no longer using each other to validate your awakening or heal your wounds. You're simply two beings who have agreed to walk alongside each other, celebrating the light and witnessing the shadow, without needing the other person to be anything other than what they are. This is where Wu Wei really shows up. There's no force, no agenda, no trying. Things happen naturally. You might go weeks without talking and then spend an entire day together and it feels like no time has passed. Or you might text every day for a month and then not at all for a while. The form becomes irrelevant. What matters is the quality of presence you bring to whatever form the connection takes. Now, let me address something that many people wonder about, but few people speak openly about. What about romantic relationships? What happens when two awakened souls meet? And there's also romantic attraction. This is a complex territory, because on one hand, a romantic relationship between two awakened people can be the most profound, transformative experience of a lifetime. There's intimacy at every level: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. There's the capacity to navigate conflict with awareness and compassion. There's the ability to give each other space without interpreting it as rejection. There's the willingness to see each other fully and love each other anyway. But on the other hand, romantic relationships come with their own conditioning, their own expectations, their own baggage. Even awakened people have wounds around intimacy, around abandonment, around worthiness. And sometimes, adding the complexity of romance to a soul connection can actually obscure the deeper teaching. Sometimes the universe brings two awakened souls together not to be romantic partners, but to be mirrors, teachers, catalysts for each other's continued evolution. The Tao is wise in this way. It doesn't always give us what we want. It gives us what we need for our awakening. Sometimes that's a romantic partner who sees us fully. Sometimes that's a friend who challenges us completely. Sometimes that's a brief encounter with someone who says exactly the sentence we needed to hear, and then disappears from our life forever. In my case, what started as a soul connection with romantic undertones evolved into something I can only describe as spiritual kinship. We did explore the romantic possibility. We spent time in that space, feeling into it. But we both realized that the teaching of our connection was not about building a life together in the conventional sense. It was about learning to love without grasping, to commit without controlling, to stay connected while remaining free. This was one of the hardest lessons I've learned, because the ego wants to lock down love. It wants to define it, own it, secure it. But the Tao teaches us that true love is like water. It takes the shape of whatever container it's poured into, but it never stops being itself. When we try to force love into a particular form because that's what we think it should be, we miss the gift of what it actually is. So here's what I want you to understand. When two awakened souls meet, the relationship that emerges is rarely what either person expected. It might become a deep friendship. It might become a romantic partnership. It might become a brief but intense period of mutual transformation that then naturally completes. The form is not the point. The transformation is the point. The Taoists have a concept called ziran, often translated as spontaneity or naturalness, but more deeply understood as self-so-ness, or being what you are, without trying to be what you're not. When two awakened souls meet, if they can embody ziran, the relationship becomes whatever it's naturally meant to be. Not what society says it should be, not what spiritual teachings say it should be, not what either person's wounds or fantasies say it should be. What it actually, naturally, organically is. This requires tremendous trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the other person, trust in the Tao, in the unfolding, in the wisdom of what is. And trust is not something you can force or fake. It's cultivated through practice, through choosing it again and again, through falling and getting back up. Let me give you a practice now, something you can do whether you've met an awakened soul or not. Because here's the truth, you can't go looking for awakened souls. That's the ego's game. Seeking, searching, trying to find your tribe or your people is just another form of not being present to what is. But you can do the work that makes you available for these meetings when they naturally occur. The practice is simple. For the next 7 days, I want you to practice radical honesty with yourself. Not with anyone else yet, just with yourself. Set aside 15 minutes each day and sit with this question. Where am I performing? Where am I pretending to be someone I'm not? Don't judge what comes up. Don't try to fix it. Just see it. Write it down if that helps. Notice the ways you curate your image, even to yourself. Notice the stories you tell yourself about who you are and who you're not. Notice where you're clinging to being spiritual, or awakened, or evolved. This practice is harder than it sounds, because we're so used to performing that we don't even realize we're doing it. We've been doing it for so long that the mask feels like our face. But awakening is not about becoming someone else. It's about removing the masks and discovering who you've always been underneath. After 7 days of this practice, if you're willing to go deeper, try this. Share one truth with someone close to you that you've been hiding. Not a small truth, a real one. Something that makes you vulnerable. Something that risks them seeing you differently. And notice what happens. Notice the fear that comes up. Notice the relief that might follow. Notice whether they can hold space for your truth or whether they need you to go back to performing. This is how you become available for meetings with awakened souls, not by seeking them out, but by becoming real yourself. Like calls to like. Truth recognizes truth. When you stop hiding from yourself, you become visible to others who have also stopped hiding. Now I want to address something that might be coming up for you as you listen to this. You might be thinking, this sounds beautiful, but I haven't met anyone like this. I feel alone on this path. Everyone around me seems asleep, and I feel like the only one who sees things differently. First, let me say, I understand. I've been there. That loneliness is real, and it's one of the hardest parts of awakening. Because when you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. You can't pretend that superficial conversations are satisfying. You can't fake interest in things that feel meaningless. You can't ignore the depth you've discovered just to fit in. But here's what I learned, and it's crucial. Just because someone hasn't had a dramatic awakening experience doesn't mean they're not awake in their own way. The mistake many of us make after awakening is that we start to judge other people as asleep, or unconscious, or not on the path. We create a hierarchy in our minds where we're enlightened and they're not. This is spiritual ego, and it's one of the most insidious traps on the path. The Tao doesn't judge. Nature doesn't label some things as spiritual and other things as mundane. A tree doesn't think it's more enlightened than a rock. They're both expressions of the Tao, both perfectly themselves. In the same way, someone who has never had a mystical experience, but who shows up every day with kindness, who loves their family, who does their work with integrity, they might be more aligned with the Tao than someone who has had profound spiritual experiences, but uses them to feel superior. So if you haven't met an awakened soul yet, don't waste your energy wishing for it or feeling like something is wrong. Instead, practice seeing the awakening that's already present in the people around you. Practice recognizing the moments when someone drops their mask, even for a second. Practice being the kind of presence that invites others to be real. This is the teaching of the Bodhisattva in Buddhist traditions, and the Taoists have their own version. The sage benefits all things without taking credit. Be that person. Be the one who asks deeper questions. Be the one who doesn't settle for surface-level conversations. Be the one who can hold space for other people's truth without needing to fix it or judge it. When you become this, you'll be amazed how many awakened souls suddenly appear in your life. They were always there. You just couldn't see them yet. Let me come back to my own story for a moment, because there's more to tell. After about a year of knowing this woman from the tea house, something unexpected happened. We both ended up moving to different cities. There was no drama around it, no big goodbye. We both just followed our paths, and our paths diverged. We stayed in touch, but we went from seeing each other almost daily to maybe talking once every few months. And here's what surprised me. It didn't feel like a loss. There was no grief, no sense that something had ended, because I realized that what we had given each other couldn't be taken away by physical distance. She had shown me what it felt like to be truly seen. She had mirrored back to me my patterns and my potential. She had taught me about staying in the fire, about not running, about letting love be what it is rather than what I think it should be. And I had done the same for her. These teachings don't expire. They're not dependent on proximity. They become part of who you are. This is the fourth thing that happens when awakened souls meet. They leave imprints on each other's souls, not in a possessive way, not in a "you complete me" way, but in a "you helped me remember who I am" way. The Taoists have a practice called inner alchemy, the transformation of consciousness through meditation and cultivation. But there's also relational alchemy, the transformation that happens through deep connection with others. When two awakened souls meet, they become alchemists for each other. They help turn the lead of unconscious patterns into the gold of awakened presence. And once that alchemy has occurred, once that transformation has happened, it doesn't matter if you're in the same room or on opposite sides of the planet. You carry each other's gifts. You've become, in some small way, more yourself because of them. And they've become more themselves because of you. This is why awakened souls can meet and then part without clinging. Not because they don't care, but because they understand that the Tao brings people together for a season, for a reason, for a teaching. And when that season is complete, when that teaching has been received, the Tao guides them in new directions. Fighting this natural flow creates suffering. Accepting it creates peace. Now let me share with you what I believe is the deepest teaching of what happens when two awakened souls meet. It's this. These meetings are reminders. Reminders that you're not alone. Reminders that there are others walking this path. Reminders that awakening is not about transcending human connection, but about deepening it. Reminders that love, real love, soul love, is always available when we're willing to be real. But here's the key. You can't wait for these meetings to feel connected. You can't put your life on hold until you find your people. Because the Tao is not something that exists only in profound spiritual connections. The Tao is everywhere. It's in the stranger who smiles at you on the street. It's in the difficult coworker who triggers your patience. It's in the family member who doesn't understand you but loves you anyway. It's in the quiet moments alone when you feel the presence of something larger than yourself. Every moment is an opportunity for awakening. Every relationship is a potential mirror. Every interaction is a chance to practice presence. When you understand this, you stop dividing your life into spiritual moments and mundane moments. Everything becomes practice. Everyone becomes a teacher. The woman from the tea house taught me this. But so did the barista who made my coffee every morning. So did the elderly man who sat in the park feeding pigeons. So did my own reflection in the mirror on the days I didn't want to look at myself. They were all faces of the Tao, all invitations to wake up a little more. So here's my challenge to you. And this is the second practice I want to offer. For the next 30 days, approach every person you meet as if they are an awakened soul. Not because they necessarily are in the way we've been discussing, but because every person is a perfect expression of the Tao in this moment, whether they know it or not. Every person has depths you haven't discovered. Every person has wisdom you haven't accessed. Every person is fighting battles you know nothing about. When you bring this awareness to your interactions, something miraculous happens. People start to show up differently around you, not because they've changed, but because you're seeing them differently. You're giving them permission to be more real. You're creating space for depth. And sometimes, in those spaces, you discover that the awakened souls you were searching for have been right in front of you all along. This doesn't mean every interaction will be profound. Most won't be. The Taoists understood that life is mostly ordinary. But within the ordinary, there are these moments of extraordinary recognition, these flashes of connection, these reminders that we're all walking each other home. To quote Ram Dass, let me close with this. The question, what happens when two awakened souls meet, is really asking, what is possible between two humans who have stopped pretending? And the answer is, everything. Everything is possible. not in a magical, fantastical way, but in a real, grounded human way. Deep conversation becomes possible. Genuine intimacy becomes possible. Unconditional presence becomes possible. Challenge without judgment becomes possible. Growth without force becomes possible. Love without possession becomes possible. Connection without clinging becomes possible. Truth without cruelty becomes possible. When two people can meet in this space, even for a moment, they create a field of possibility that ripples out far beyond themselves. They become proof that another way of being is possible. They become living examples of what the Tao teaches, that when we stop trying to force life to be what we think it should be, it blossoms into something more beautiful than we could have imagined. So whether you've met an awakened soul or not, whether you're in a profound spiritual connection right now, or feeling completely alone, know this: you are exactly where you need to be. The Tao is always bringing you what you need for your next level of awakening. Sometimes that's another person. Sometimes that's solitude. Sometimes that's challenge. Sometimes that's ease. Your job is not to seek awakened souls. Your job is to be one, to do your work, to face your shadows, to drop your masks, to tell the truth, first to yourself, and then, when appropriate, to others. To be present to what is, rather than what you wish it was. To practice Wu Wei, effortless action, following the natural flow of your life rather than forcing it into shapes that don't fit. When you do this, you become a beacon, and other beacons will find you, not because you're seeking them, but because light recognizes light. Truth recognizes truth. The Tao recognizes itself in all its expressions. The woman from the tea house and I still talk occasionally. Just last week she sent me a message. It said, "Thank you for being the mirror I needed. I'm still learning to stay in the fire." I wrote back, "Me too. Always me too." Because that's the real teaching. There is no destination. There is no final awakening where you never struggle again. There is only this moment, and then the next one, and the next one. And in each moment, you get to choose. Will I show up real? Will I be present to what is? Will I let love be what it is, rather than what I think it should be? These are the questions awakened souls ask themselves every day, not because they have all the answers, but because they've learned to live in the questions, not because they've transcended their humanity, but because they've learned to embrace it fully. So I'll leave you with this. Go be real. Drop one mask today. Tell one truth you've been hiding. Ask one deeper question. Create one moment of genuine presence. That's all it takes. One moment of being truly awake, truly yourself, truly here. And who knows, maybe that's the moment when another awakened soul recognizes you. Or maybe, more importantly, that's the moment when you recognize yourself. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me, have you ever met someone who saw you so clearly that all your masks fell away? What happened? How did it change you? And if you haven't had this experience yet, what is one mask you're ready to drop? Share your story. Be real. This is how we walk this path together. And if this resonated with you, if you felt seen in these words, come back in 7 days after you've done the first practice. Tell me what you discovered about where you're still performing. Let's build a community of people committed to being real, not perfect, because that's what the world needs more than anything. Not more people trying to be spiritual, but more people willing to be human. The path continues, and we walk it together, even when we walk alone. That's the paradox. That's the teaching. That's what happens when awakened souls meet. They remember that they were never really separate to begin with. Until next time, stay present, stay real, and trust the Tao to bring you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, because it always does.